Why you feel lonely even when you're not alone. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. Maybe you're in a full room right now, or you remember being in one last week. People who know your name, people who'd call you a friend if you ask them. And underneath all of it, a quiet that has nothing to do with how many people are around you. If that sounds familiar, keep watching. Here are 5 reasons you feel lonely, even when you're not alone. And I don't mean 5 vague ideas. I mean 5 specific explanations that will change what you think this feeling says about you. Some of these you've already suspected but never said out loud. One of them, especially, will make you realize the loneliness you feel in a crowd isn't a weakness. It's a sign of something most people never develop. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General called loneliness a national epidemic. Lacking real connection, his report found, carries the same health risk as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But one number from that report barely made the news. Nearly 3 in 5 Americans say no one truly knows them. Not that they lack friends. Not that they're isolated on paper. They can have a full calendar and still feel like nobody has ever actually seen them. Dr. Elizabeth Pinnell, a psychologist at the University of Vermont, has spent years studying this exact gap. She calls it existential isolation, feeling alone in your own perception of reality, even while someone is sitting right next to you. Here's what her research keeps finding. This kind of loneliness has almost nothing to do with how many people are in the room. It has everything to do with how much of the real you ever makes it into that room. Truth 1. The version of you that shows up to most rooms isn't actually you. Psychologists call it expressive suppression. Simple idea. You quietly dial back what you're really feeling or thinking, so social situations go smoother. You've done this more than you realize. You match the room's energy instead of bringing your own. You edit out the comment that would have taken the conversation somewhere real, because tonight didn't feel like the night for that. A 2025 research review found something worth sitting with. People who consistently suppress what they actually feel are far more likely to end up lonely, not because nobody's around, because the person in the room is a curated version, and some part of them knows it. Think about the last event you went to. How much of what you actually thought did you say out loud? How much did you notice that nobody else mentioned? That gap between what you feel and what you say doesn't stay small. Over years, it becomes the distance between you and everyone around you. You're not lonely because people aren't there. You're lonely because the full version of you rarely is. The loneliness in a crowd isn't about who's missing. It's about how much of yourself you left at the door. Truth 2. Your brain genuinely processes the world differently. This isn't a metaphor. A 2021 neuroimaging study found that lonely people show measurably different neural activity when processing the exact same social information as people around them. Same room, same conversation, different experience entirely. You pick up on things others miss. You're still sitting with the implications of something someone said 3 minutes ago while the room has already moved on. Writers at Psychology Today and Forbes described this in 2026 as cognitive asymmetry, a mind running at a level most social situations simply weren't built to reach. And when a mind like that shows up to a conversation designed for a different frequency, the result isn't arrogance, it's isolation. You're not being difficult. You're running a more complex process in an environment that was never built for it. You don't feel alone because you're outside the room. You feel alone because your mind is somewhere most rooms have never been. But that only explains what's happening inside you. Truth 3 is about what's been happening between you and the people who actually love you. Truth 3. The people who love you may be connected to a version of you that's no longer complete. Researchers split loneliness into types. Relational loneliness is the absence of close friendships. Intimate loneliness is different. It's the absence of even one relationship where you feel fully known. You can have plenty of the first and still be starving from the second. Most people who love you are connected to the version of you that you consistently make available, manageable, predictable, comfortable for the relationship. Years of quietly editing yourself widens that gap, and nobody notices until you're sitting across from someone who loves you and feeling completely alone anyway. That's not their failure. It's not yours either. It's what happens when two people stay connected through habit and history, while one of them keeps growing in directions they never fully shared. You're not lonely because no one cares. You're lonely because the person they care about is only part of who you actually are. We're halfway through. Let me be direct for a second. The first 3 truths explained what's happening around you. Truths 4 and 5 go somewhere heavier. They explain what this loneliness is actually made of, and why feeling it at all isn't the flaw you've been treating it as. Truth 4 especially is going to reframe something you've carried for a long time. Truth 4, you're not lonely because something's wrong with you. You're lonely because your standard for connection is accurate. The WHO Commission on Social Connection published its findings in June 2025, with a point almost nobody picked up on. What protects people from loneliness isn't how many connections they have. It's the quality. 1 or 2 relationships where a person feels genuinely seen and genuinely known. For most people, something close to that is enough. A friend who mostly gets it. A partner who knows them well enough. For you, well enough has never actually felt like enough, and you've spent years wondering if that makes you too demanding, too complicated to be known by an average amount of effort. Here's what the research actually says. Your standard isn't inflated. It's accurate. The need to be truly seen isn't a luxury. It's one of the most basic psychological requirements a person has. The problem was never that you need too much. It's that most social environments were built to give too little, and you're honest enough with yourself to notice the difference. You were never made to settle for being half known by people you fully love. Truth 5. The loneliness you feel in a crowd isn't isolation. It's depth. Psychology Today published a piece in April 2026, noting that intelligent people often look socially successful from the outside while reporting more isolation than their peers. And this isn't just a feeling researchers took at face value. Here's the actual mechanism. Finding what researchers call mental peers, people who process the world at a similar depth, is a statistical problem. Not because those people don't exist, because in any ordinary room, the odds of one of them being there are genuinely low. So you show up. You do the work of the conversation. You're competent, even warm, and underneath it, you carry a quiet awareness that none of it is reaching the part of you that actually needs to be reached. That's not damage. It's a kind of depth most people never develop, so they never notice it's missing in themselves, and they definitely don't notice it in you. The loneliness you feel in a full room isn't proof you're broken. It's proof you require something real, and you've never been able to fake being satisfied with less. The loneliness you feel in a crowd isn't emptiness. It's your depth looking for somewhere to land. Everything we've covered isn't a list of things wrong with you. It's the explanation for something that's followed you through crowded rooms and full relationships, through a life that looks connected from the outside and has sometimes felt quietly empty from the inside. You weren't too much. You weren't asking for more than reasonable. You weren't broken by needing something most people around you didn't seem to need. You were someone with a real, rare capacity for depth, moving through decades of ordinary social life without ever finding the language for what was missing. Maybe tonight you found a little of it. Once you understand the loneliness was never about an empty room, something shifts. Not because the right people suddenly show up, because you stop treating the ache as proof something's wrong with you and start recognizing it for what it is. A signal from the deepest part of you, still there, still intact. You were never lonely because you were too much. You were lonely because most rooms weren't nearly enough. If you've spent years in full rooms feeling quietly alone, wondering what that said about you, I hope this gave you something solid to hold on to, not just information, understanding, the kind that doesn't need the room to change before it becomes true. It starts in the part of you that already knew something real was missing and never stopped looking for it anyway. You were never the problem. If this landed, if even for a second you felt genuinely understood, subscribe. This channel is built for people who think deeply and are ready to understand themselves at a level most people never reach. And if there's a part of your own mind you'd like understood next, leave it in the comments. Your next video might be the one you ask for.